involved in youth activism. You are a very talented rapper and have that whole combination of the Puerto Rican and American kind of background and everything, but I've listened to some of your music and was quite impressed, but I know that part of what you do is also dealing with mentoring and things of that nature because you consider yourself to be a youth advocate. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit with us about some of what you're doing in youth activism and a little bit about your project, because we were earlier talking about politics and we were talking about some of the women that are about to make a change, including possibly the first African-American governor in Georgia. At least that's what I'm rooting for. And I know that you've been involved. I know you've been involved in trying to have a lot of women involved in politics also. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about what you're involved with, and that's some of our stuff that we'll start with is the youth activism and women in politics, because I know that that's something that you're a big fan of. You even named your project in support of women in politics.
Definitely. Well, to answer the first part of your question, or just to speak on behalf of mentoring, I direct the mentorship program with the Twin Cities Mobile Jazz Project, which is a nonprofit organization with the mission to serve youth and getting credit to children that are 12 to 18 years with a independently contracted our organization with SPPS, which is St. Paul Public Schools here in Minnesota, and the St. Paul Park and Recs. And it's directed by a mentor of mine who is Mr. Andre Fisher, who is known as a Grammy Award-winning producer and drummer for Rufus and Shaka Khan, and produced the Unforgettable project. So we take our mentorship to the community, specifically towards our Black and Brown and Indigenous children in the Twin Cities, to ensure them that music is medicine and it can help us deal with, the traumatic experiences that we grow in groups of oppressed people.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that we oftentimes don't think about how important mentoring is to all of the parts of our society, and definitely it is something that I hear a lot of in terms of our African-American community and definitely our brown community as well. And you actually even mentioned another one that I don't think that we hear enough of in terms of reaching out to the Native community as well, because I know that I have some of that as part of my heritage, and I actually have a cousin who's very much involved in that kind of society. She's actually attends the powwows throughout the country and things of that nature, and she runs a school in Holliston, North Carolina called the Raven School, which is like a school of teaching folks about dance but other performance arts as well. And oftentimes when we think of people that we're reaching out to, that is a group that I feel that we sometimes leave out. We always hear about programs that reach out definitely the African American community, definitely in some cases the poor white community, definitely to some degree the Hispanic community, and even when they need it, even though sometimes people don't want to put them in that same category because a lot of them are quote unquote affluent, the Asian community. But we oftentimes do not hear people talking about mentoring programs for those that are of Native American background. So I was wondering how that all came about. I know Minnesota definitely has a strong connection to that area, having some tribes that are further in the northern parts of Minnesota.
Well, we talk, definitely the demographics here. We also have Asian, a large Hmong population, and East African with Somali and Ethiopian youth. So we look at the demographics of our town, but we also say, let's utilize and recognize that music is a universal language. So regardless if, you are a child that is refuge from Southeast Asia or Africa or have, recently crossed the border, there's a time there's no time in the school hour where their teachers are asking them, how do you feel? Are you comfortable? There's no communication. So the child has been through traumatized experiences. And then you also have our Black and brown youth and Indigenous youth who deal with the oppressed society here of the prison pipeline and drug abuse and the disadvantages that we do see in our communities of color, right? So how do we have a full classroom that is so diverse with just different nationalities, different language? Music is the universal language, so we all are unified through the power of the drum. And if we can't just focus on one drum from one side of the world, we have to start with what land we're on right now. And this is native land. This is Minnesota, so it connects our young brothers and sisters from so many different backgrounds to unify and say whatever systemic and racism that has been infused in these textbooks that we're learning from, we're actually backtracking and learning on our own through tradition and through culture. And they see the empowerment that they have. They can reflect that on themselves. They don't have to be told that. They can actually feel that through the music that they're creating. So that's, a little bit about the mentoring that we do and what we focus on.
Yeah, y'all definitely do a great job with that and things of that nature. But when you talk in the mentoring, when you talk to some of the educators, and this is actually for both you and Randall, this question, how do you reach the teachers? Because a lot of times I agree with you that a lot of times the teachers don't hear the message of how to reach our youth. They've been trained in such a way as to only, like I mentioned earlier, teach to the test and not necessarily teach to the youth that are coming from parts of society that are not what is in the school book. So I'll start with you, ladies first, of course. So I'll start with you, Maria, but I also want to hear from Randall. How do you get these teachers to engage in this conversation with our youth?
With our program, we look at it as not just we're taking over the class. We're looking at it as like we're all learning from each other here, right? And we start with focusing on meditation and having kids experience that they can have some time to themselves to be able to reflect on what they're celebrating or what's causing a problem, And most teachers, like you said, there's a curriculum. It's a state law. You got to follow this, right, through your district. So they don't have that connection to be able to say, we're going to change things around a little bit. But through our program, they see that our kids listen. They support our program by volunteering with us outside of their normal school session. And so they begin to say, you know what, we want to incorporate, your curriculum with ours because our students are your students, but they tend to be listening to you and they tend to be productive, and we want that here. So it actually ends up being where our students are reading lyrics. They're researching about artists who look like them and the history of Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday. They're writing these reports, and then they're also learning production and technical and theory, which is math. So we discuss that in something they connect to, and then you see that influence them in those math classes, in those English classes. We tell them to speak their language if, English may be their second language, and recognizing that the teachers need to learn how to teach the kid. The kid can't be learning how to learn from the teacher. And so those are the steps that we take as far as the instructor. You may have that leadership, but the word mentoring means that, you receive and you get. You give and you receive, and you also receive and give. It's a boomerang effect. We can't just say, I'm in my 30s now, I'm the teacher. No, I actually have my students that teach me every day.
Right. And I'm sure that it's interesting that you mention bringing up both Billie Holiday and Dizzy Gillespie, because a lot of times we have folks that think that our youth don't understand some of these great legends, or they don't want to get introduced into these legends, even though a lot of times, as you know, being an artist that is yourself, that is involved in the hip-hop industry, a lot of times these are the same artists that inspired a lot of folks. I mean, I'm a big fan of the blues music. I do a blues show on Thursday afternoons and at another radio station, and blues to me is nothing but another version of hip-hop. A lot of the same issues that hip-hop dealt with in the 80s, 90s, and then throughout the 2000s is the same issues that blues music has dealt with when it first came out, whether it was issues about racism, whether it was issues about relationships, whether it was issues revolving around a lot of the things that are in hip-hop, and even like being the news reported to some degree of what's going on. Because that's one of the things that I remember they said about early hip-hop was that it was talking about the news that was going on. I mean, one of my favorite hip-hop songs is The Message. And a lot of times those were very much about telling what was going on in society. But at the same time, one of the great jazz artists was Gil Scott-Heron, and he definitely told about politics all the time. I mean, he would have had a field day with Trump. I'm convinced he would have had a field day with Trump if he was still living. Because I remember what he did to Nixon and what he did to Reagan. So if Gil Scott was still living, he would have had a field day with Trump.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And, you know, when you say, but there's another thing, like these kids come in and what's old to them is Michael Jackson and Prince, you know?
That's right.
And they may not even know who, you know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we know him through Nick at Night or something, you know? So it's like these hip-hop is now grown into that element of being able to discuss history and not just starting in the late 70s, you know? We can go into the jazz greats. We can go into also the Afro-Latin jazz connection with Eddie Palmieri and Claire Fisher, who's white. You know, you can discuss the same issues that we're seeing here now, but contemporized, obviously. You know, you have kids in our class who they knew Philando Castile. That was our lunchroom man, you know. That's a friend of mine who made sure that our kids had lunches. And so when that happened, there was nobody in the school that day, in summer school, that said, kids, you know, how are you feeling right now? What's going on? There was people in the hallway that are security yelling at them to go back in their class, and these kids is crying. When they come into our classroom, we're hurt. We express ourselves. We allow the kids to express themselves, and our kids came up with a hip-hop song and wrote something within 10 minutes that became a national awareness of saying this has got to stop. When they saw that they had the same empowerment just as much as James Brown has when they killed Dr. King, you know what I'm saying? The same empowerment through their voices. They recognize that they mean something and they stand for something.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I want to bring Randall into the conversation real quickly. Before I get to that, one of the other things that really amazed me about you, Maria, is that you also are not one of those artists that's afraid to tackle what some people might consider controversial issues with your song lyrics, with what you do, and things of that nature. Because I know that you did a lot of fundraising for the relief efforts that needs to be held in Puerto Rico, and you've also been one that has talked about how you feel Puerto Rico, if I'm understanding correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the feeling that you are one of those that definitely believe that Puerto Rico should have either independence or statehood.
I believe that Puerto Rico should be free and independent. I'm raised by, you know, my parents that have raised me within our culture. I may have been born in Minnesota, but Puerto Rico was born in me, and our struggle still continues. And I think just after the hurricane, you know, it was every Puerto Rican within the diaspora's first mission, because we knew that this was going to happen. The hurricane just brought out the skeletons in the closet of corrupt government. And under this Trump administration, the timing just happened to be, okay, this is going to be pure genocide now. This is going to be a swiping of, let's get rid of as many people. They don't have any numbers. This is a big circus down here when it comes to government, always has been. So when you have, you know, other Boricuas outside of the island that still work and still have connections with our families and our people there through educational institutions, cultural institutions, you know, it wasn't I got to do this. This is like, no, this is what we do, you know. So fortunately, we've been able to help a lot within the Puerto Rican community here in Minnesota and outside. I mean, we've had the black community come out. We've had the Asian, the white folks out here. You know, everybody says, you know, you come through for us. When it happens within our communities, we have to come through for you. And I said, this isn't about me. This is about actually close to 4 million U.S. citizens that are the highest military recruitment since World War I that have been left to starve and die. And so the relief efforts here in Minnesota, I'm very thankful for the state and the community that I'm from, because we've been able to do actually more as independent artists and activists than our own country's FEMA has. Wow. But yes.
And that's one of the things that I've actually visited for the first time in Puerto Rico this past Christmas, and that was one of the things that I was disappointed by. I mean, I was glad that I was able to go on this trip, and it was through a cruise and everything, so I did get to see at least parts of Puerto Rico. But one of the things that's the bad part about cruises is that you're in and out, and you only get to see like a limited amount of the country, because the tourism stop, and you don't really get the chance to view the country the way that you really would like to. And that's one of the things that I wish I had more time to do, and I might have to find a way to get back there. I know one of my brother's close friends is actually of Puerto Rican background as well, so I would like to get there and actually see the gist of the country and not just